I forgot to mention that one of the Chris's here is my godson. The Chris with CHR. The Googlettas came all the way down from Austin for this Mass today. So nice to see you. I had a pretty good homily today, but I thought I might better tell you a little bit about myself as well. That way, if you don't like me, you might have time to catch Mass at St. John's. No, I'll work it into the message for today. When I was an associate at a parish in South Austin, I used to play music with a group of folks at a barbecue place. We played bluegrass on Thursday nights, and there was about anywhere from 10 to 15 of us, and we'd sit around in a circle, and we'd take turns leading a song. Each one of us would pick out a song, and we'd go around the circle, and you could lead the song, and you could do the singing, and you could set the tempo and whatever you wanted to do with it, and we'd be there all playing our instruments. We had a couple of banjos, we had guitars and a bass, upright bass, and sometimes a fiddle, and we'd sing and have a great time. And but the procedure was, if you were the leader of the song, then when you got towards the end of the song, you had to let everyone know it was time to finish, because bluegrass players like that finish. We look forward to the ending. It's probably the only part we get right. But we'd be sitting there, with both hands on our instruments playing. And so if you were a leader and you were ready to end the song, you'd stick one foot out in the circle and say, this is the last verse. So you go to the last chorus and you do the great, the ending, the great ending. Well, it happened that occasionally we weren't doing so well, and a song was out of pitch or out of key, or we weren't getting the chords right, it was too complicated. And so in cases like that, it didn't matter who was leading. I'd look over at Dave, and Dave would look at Chuck, and Chuck would look back at me, and we'd stick both feet out in the yard. That's enough, that's enough. I think Jesus is saying the same kind of a thing when he tells the disciples, dust the feet off, wash the dust off your feet when you leave a place where they don't accept you. Jesus is saying, maybe he's saying in modern terms, life is too short. If you go to preach the gospel or to live the gospel, sometimes people aren't ready for it. Sometimes people aren't going to listen to you. And he said, wipe the dust off your feet and move on. Go on to some other place. Maybe it's just not time for them yet. Maybe God needs a little more time to work with them. The other lesson for us is in the message of the gospel today is travel light. Travel light. He asked the disciples not to carry anything more than what you need. One change of clothes, one pair of sandals. Don't carry baggage with you through life. Don't carry spiritual baggage. Let it go. Let it sit, because God wants to do new things in our lives. And that's where I'm here today. We're beginning we're into the year of the domestic church, and this month the theme for the church to reflect upon is we are God's children. What does it mean to be a child of God? What does it mean to be adopted as a child of God into God's family? Well, I know some of you have done this before, but sometimes we walk across stepping stones to get from one side of the creek bed to the other, one side of the river to the other. I used to have a little route around the lake in Purcell, Oklahoma. A friend of mine, Amanda, and I used to go running, and you'd run around this lake and you'd get to the spillway, and often there'd be water that would be trickling across the spillway. It didn't take much rain for the lake to have to drain across the spillway. And someone had laid out about 20 to 30 stepping rocks across the spillway so that you could get to it without having to walk through the water. Well, they weren't they just, whatever rocks that were there, they weren't all flat. Many of them were rounded and rough. And it was kind of a balancing act to get from one stepping stone to the other. And Amanda was much better at it than me. I think women have better balance. Not sure why. It's a body thing. I won't go too far there. But she always made it across, but I'd end up falling off the side, stepping into the water, and I have to run the rest of the way with wet shoes, which is an awful thing to do. But to me, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor of being a child of God, that God has laid out these steps for us to walk upon. And sometimes if we don't make it on the step, we stumble and fall off on the edge. One of the things that we might fall into is what we kind of term in this day and age is relativism. Relativism, there's lots of different truths. You know, what you believe might be different from me. What's true to you is different from what's true to me. You know, it's all kind of very subjective. But God is saying, no, there is only one truth, and it's on this path that I'm leading you. Scientists would say, in a similar way, they would say there's something called consilience. Consilience is the eventual harmony of all truths into one unified truth, kind of like the unified field theory in physics. But the truths of the natural sciences, the truths of the social sciences, the truths of humanity, eventually will point to the same truth. They call it consilience. We call it God. God is the source of truth. He's the source of beauty, of true beauty, and the source of goodness. And so we walk this path of life, and we're kind of stumbling to get by. We want to stay on the truth. And there's different things that keep us on those stones, keep us on those paths. And this is where I want to bring in my story now. So I'm a native Texan. How many of you are native Texans? Yeah, wow, that's pretty good. I didn't have too many of them in Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, they wanted to build a wall, but they wanted to build it on the Red River, not the. They want to keep the Texans out. But I was born in Corpus Christi. We didn't live there for very long, but I was baptized in the church there. We moved to Bryan, Texas for a little while, just long enough for my brother to enter the seminary for my oldest brother for the Austin Diocese, and my sister to fall in love and marry her eventual husband named Frankie Zemanek, who became one of my role models. So after we lived there for a few years, we moved to Longview, Texas, in northeast Texas, and that's where I grew up. I spent all my schooling there through high school, went to Catholic school through 8th grade, was confirmed, First Communion confirmed at St. Anthony's Church in Longview. There's not a lot of Catholics in Longview. At that time, we were one parish. I just heard there are 3 parishes now, but at that time we were a lonely little island of Catholics in the midst of lots of Baptists. So, but we were a strong parish, and my family was very strong in their faith. So we went to church every Sunday. It was no question. When I got a little bit older, I was able to start helping with the music. When I was 12 years old, I started playing the guitar and forming a choir at the church. We went to confessions once a month on the first Saturday. I remember that because after confession, Dad would drive us to the A&W root beer stand, and we got root beer floats, which was our little treat for going to confession. So we practiced as a family. We practiced our faith. It was also in this beautiful part of the state where I began my fascination with water and with the environment, with camping and being outdoors. And I owe much of this to Frankie, my older brother-in-law. He took us canoeing, myself and my friends. We'd go canoeing on the Sabine River, and then eventually on the Brazos and the Colorado River, and eventually on the San Marcos River, where we actually broke a couple of canoes on the rapids. But that's another story for a different time. But enjoyed every minute of it. So I was around water. I was around the Lake of the Pines. We'd go water skiing at the Lake of the Pines. I was around water a lot and began to feel the presence of God in creation, mostly through water-related activities and events. So as I got older, I went to Texas A&M, studied environmental engineering at A&M, and later would go to graduate school, later would go to seminary, and I'll tell about my vocation story at another time. But my older brother became a priest. He's a priest of the Diocese of Austin. He's retired now. He's going to come fill in for me a few times, so I think you'll get to meet Father Tom Chamberlain. I have an older uncle who has passed away. He was a priest in Iowa. My mom and dad are both from Iowa. But all this was to say that, and then when I entered my adult life, I've either worked as an engineer, environmental engineer, or as a priest. But in 2011, I got the opportunity to combine the two, and that was with the Water Center at the University of Oklahoma. They had an opening for an engineer to help build capacity of the Water Center, which is a center devoted to bringing clean drinking water and sanitation to people in need across the world. So I was very interested in this. I asked the bishop if I could have 5 years. He said yes, and that 5 years got extended to another 3 years and then another 2 years. So I was there for 10 years before returning to Texas, to my home state. But it was that in those 10 years I was able to work as a priest. I had 2 parishes, rural parishes outside of south of Norman, and then worked at the university during the day. I mentored college students who wanted to do development work, taught classes, took them on trips overseas. We actually did water projects and some sanitation projects. So it was a way for me to combine my love of water and love of God, who has been so present to me in creation, with my theology, my spirituality, and my call to ministry. So as I think about these stepping stones, I'd like to show you how it has worked out for me, and maybe for some of you, that one of the stepping stones that leads me in my life of faith is the liturgy and the sacraments. I've always been, first because of my family, then because of my own desire, been a regular participant in the Eucharist and the sacraments of confession, and even the sacraments of anointing on occasion, which are mentioned in today's reading. Sacrament of anointing is a powerful sacrament that we Catholics enjoy. I did chaplaincy work at a children's hospital in Dallas, and one of my colleagues was a Baptist minister, Kent Taylor, and one day he said to me, he said, "You Catholics are so lucky." He said, "You have that sacrament in which you can go in and physically touch someone and anoint them with oil." He said, I wish we had that, because it's such a powerful symbol of God's love for someone in the hour of their death. He said, "I can go and pray with them and I can hold their hand, but this is such a powerful presence of God in a special way." So the sacraments have kept me on the path. The saints have kept me on the path. I think I was named Francis after my uncle, who was named after Saint Francis, and so I've adopted both Francis and Joseph as my confirmation duo. I needed 2 saints. I was kind of a wild kid. So I wanted to be like Joseph, a hard worker, but I wanted to be Francis, who loved creation. So the saints have been one of the stepping stones. Other stepping stones, my Aunt Lucille. Aunt Lucille is a living saint, just passed away. and you have people in your life. She was always a person of prayer, always left everything up to God, and everything was God's will that we would accept. She was a witness to me. Another stepping stone for me was finding God in all of creation. Even today, my prayer is nothing less and nothing more than being outside in creation, feeling the rustling of the leaves, hearing the rustling of the leaves, or feeling the breeze, or taking a dip in the cool waters of the Edwards Aquifer Springs. God has always been present to me there and always will be in his creation. Spiritual reading has been a stepping stone to keep me on track and in focus. I can't imagine not going very long without having some reflection or some book to read to keep me in tune with how God is wanting to work in my life. My sister Jeannie, my older sister Jeannie, who all her life struggled with health problems. She had dizzy spells, she had cancer. She just died last year, not from COVID, but from cancer in October of last year. But all her life, she kept a strong faith in the Lord, and knowing that this was the cross she had to bear, and she just did the best she could with it. She also had a son, and his name was Christopher. She lost in a car accident, but what a person of faith, and still is a person of faith to me. So as I walk along these stones gingerly, I am led now to Our Lady of Wisdom Parish, and I'm able, and this is where COVID was really good for me spiritually, is I'm able to let God do something new in my life. You know, we all spend a lot of time alone. Most of us, I hope, use that time for prayer, additional prayer and reflection, but we had a lot of time alone to reflect and to think. And God is telling me that sometimes we just need to empty ourselves because he wants to do something new. He wants to fill us with something new. Every time a priest moves from one parish to another after being someplace for a long time, it's a letting go of friends, of a routine, of a comfortable place, for a purpose to experience God's Spirit in a new way and with new people. And I already know that there is going to be an encounter of Christ with the people in my staff and the people I've already met in the parish. But you know, many of these things that I talked about are things of church. Many of these stones, and perhaps it is true with you, many of us who are cradle Catholics fell in love with the church first, didn't we? Yeah. And maybe as we get older and a bit more mature, or maybe at some point, we then experience Christ himself, the beginning, the root of the church. It's kind of like, using one final analogy, it's kind of like if you're a young man and you're really attracted to a woman, young woman, and you say, we got a lot of interest, she's kind of cute, I think I really like her. She takes you to visit her family, and wow, she's got a great family. You know, you go fishing with her uncle, you play catch with her little brother, you play music with her sister who likes to play music, and you say, wow, I love this family. I think I'm going to marry this girl. Then you say, wait a second, I don't really know her. I don't really know her that well. When we marry someone, we are adopted into a family, but we're marrying the girl that we're marrying. And so we may fall in love with the family, but we also have to fall in love with the girl we're marrying. For me, that's taken a little longer to fall in love with Jesus because I already loved his church. To fall in love with Jesus is to spend a lot of time in his presence, mostly in prayer and talking with him as a brother. And I think if we can do that, then I think as we walk those stepping stones, I think Jesus is on the last one and he's reaching out and helping us balance. He's helping us balance on those stones. That's the image that I'd like to leave you with, It's one where the Lord is waiting for us at the end of that line, protecting us from all other untruths and leading us into his one truth.